join.
Okay. Great, and we have started recording this community presentation.
And again, we'll give it a couple minutes as additional people come in. Thank you all for being prompt and joining us for tonight's meeting on the Eureka Bike Plan. We'll start shortly. Okay, it's been a few minutes. It's 5:33. Thank you again for everyone that's signed on to participate and listen in today to the Eureka Bike Plan workshop. We've just been hanging tight and let people join in.
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and get started. This meeting is being recorded, so it can be accessed later on. Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining the Eureka Bike Plan virtual community presentation, community meeting. This is the second of a series of 3 meetings that will be hosted as part of this project. So we can go on to the next slide, please. This is our agenda for today. We've got about an hour and a half of time for this meeting and a lot of content to cover. So we're going to try to get through these different agenda topics in a breeze. And then next slide. Okay, thank you. So what is the Eureka Bike Plan? This is a project whereas the goal is to plan a citywide network of enhanced bicycle facilities. And the objective of this Eureka Bike Plan project are to align with the state active transportation goals that are outlined in the California Transportation Plan 2050 and the California Active Transportation Plan. So those include objectives such as reducing greenhouse gases from the environment, improving mobility options within disadvantaged communities, increasing active transportation access to destinations, creating vibrant public spaces and enjoyable trip experiences, and increasing the safety and proportion of trips that are made by walking and bicycling. The deliverable of this Eureka Bike Plan will be a final report with identification of bikeway corridors that will receive new or enhanced bikeway facilities, and it will include policies and strategies to accomplish the objectives of that were just briefly mentioned. The outcome will be an adopted document that qualifies the city to receive state and federal grants for the design, engineering, and construction of the enhancements that are identified in the plan, and over time, the full design implementation of the identified bikeway network. So this project is being implemented by the City of Eureka Department of Public Works. And today we're joined by Jesse Willer and Jay Wardleboer, who are part of the city staff, Department of Public Works. The project is funded by a grant by Caltrans, and today we're joined by Saskia Reimer-Burnett on behalf of Caltrans. Mark Thomas is the consultant who is contracted to implement the bike plan. So my name is Shay Riddle, and I'm an employee of Mark Thomas, and we are also joined by Paul Martin and Veronica DeSantos, and all three of us will be present at the in-person community meeting on March 7th at the Jefferson Community Center at 5:30 p.m. And we'll provide that date and time to you at the end of this presentation as well if you want to write it down. Let's see. Okay, so we have some progress updates for you. So this project kicked off in the spring of 2023. We conducted an existing conditions review, which looked at land use patterns, existing bikeway facilities, collision histories, and we launched a public engagement survey. We collected feedback from the engagement survey and incorporated the aspects of the existing conditions review to inform a level of bikeway traffic stress analysis. So with the traffic stress analysis, we identified which roadways within the city were more or less comfortable for bicyclists based on exposure to vehicle traffic, separation from vehicle traffic, among a few other metrics such as posted speed limits, number of lanes, etc. From this analysis, we were able to identify areas of the city that were in need of more comfortable or lower stress bikeway facilities. And we identified what we called the preliminary corridors. So in general, regions of the city in which a low stress bikeway would be beneficial for the community. And what we mean by preliminary corridor or general location was we had our sights set on one corridor initially, but we were also looking at adjacent corridors in case one of those adjacent ones were more suitable for a bikeway facility. Then we presented our findings in the first virtual community meeting. And then in the fall of 2023, we conducted a walk audit in which we toured some of the incoming bikeway facilities and discussed with the community members, with the participants, what they would be interested in seeing at other locations throughout the city in terms of bikeway improvements. We also engaged with the students at St. Bernard's Academy and essentially presented to them the public engagement survey number 1 and got their feedback on how they felt about bicycling within the city. And we took all those results and then we refined the preliminary corridors down to the proposed corridors. So much of this presentation will cover the proposed corridors that are currently in the Eureka bike plan. Right now we have a total of 17 and we're going to get into all of them. And then for the last bullet on the list, we are also guided by a project task force, which is a group of representatives within the city who are involved in bicycling or transportation, either through hobby or their profession, who provide feedback on the plan as it is in development and help essentially guide the plan. Okay, and then next slide. Okay, so all of these 17 corridors fit within a group of 4 classifications that are adopted and recognized by the state of California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So these 4 different bikeways, we're going to go ahead and walk through them because as we look at the different corridors, each one of them have an assigned class of bikeway. So first off, we have class 3, which are shared lanes. So this is a light touch of a bikeway on a roadway. They're typically used to close gaps in bikeway facilities that have higher degrees of separation. What I mean by higher degrees of separation is something where the bicyclist has a completely different separated travel lane from the motor vehicle. So an example of a class 3 shared lane locally would be California Street. So there are sharrows and signage on California Street that identify it as a class 3 bicycle facility. Some spot treatment enhancements that can be added to a standard class 3 facility to upgrade it to a bicycle boulevard include median islands, which is what is shown in this current image, surrounded by the yellow centerline markings. So these essentially deflect the motor vehicles around the center median, thereby we say that it calms traffic. So and they're always designed so that a vehicle can still be traveling the speed limit and navigate around the center median safely. And then in the next image, we have mini traffic circles. So these are especially effective at intersections with two-way stop signs. So the travel direction approaching that does not have a stop sign does slow its speed to navigate around the mini traffic circle. However, again, they're always designed to allow the vehicle to continue through at the posted speed limit. And then in the next image, we have traffic diverters. So these are used intermittently throughout a corridor in order to redirect motor vehicle traffic to other roadways that will be more accommodating to carry that additional volume. And it provides the bicyclist with gaps where the motor vehicle traffic is lower, thereby increasing the comfort level, decreasing the stress. This wouldn't be a bicycle-only corridor throughout the entire length. It is just at intermediate or intermittent locations. And then on the last spot treatment enhancement, you would have, second to last, curb extensions. Some of these have been implemented in the city already. They essentially just increase the space around the curb, and motor vehicles must make a slower and tighter turn around. And that calms traffic, enhances safety. And then the last one is green-backed sharrows. So this is essentially the standard sharrow symbol is just the white on the pavement, and these essentially just elevate the visibility of the sharrow marking. And the next slide, please. The next class is a class 2 bike lane. These are quite typical. They're seen on locations around the city, such as Harris and Henderson. So some spot treatment enhancements that can be added to class 2 bicycle facilities include left turn bike boxes in the next image. So these are used at traffic signals. If a bicyclist wants to make a left-hand turn, approaching the traffic signal at a red light, they're provided that additional space at the front of the travel lane so that they can navigate to the left side of the roadway and make that left-hand turn when the light turns green. And then in the next image, this is a second type of left turn facility for bicyclists in a bike lane at a signalized intersection. For this one, the bicyclist essentially completes the left turn maneuver in 2 movements. As you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a bicyclist approaching the intersection. If they wanted to make a left turn from here, they would continue straight through the bike lane and then pull over slightly to the right to queue in that green box. That would be on a green light, and then they would wait for the green light in the direction where you can see the white sedan traveling. Once that light turns green, then they would essentially be able to continue through the intersection and make that left-hand turn. And then in the next image, we have solid and green dashed lanes. So these, again, just increase the visibility of the bicycle facility. And then for the last one, we have protected intersections, which essentially utilize paint and curbs in extension of the existing curb where you see many of the pedestrians there in this image, so that vehicles making a right turn through this intersection complete a slower maneuver, a tighter right turn, and the bicyclist is protected using those curbs which surround their queuing area. And then next slide, please. Then we have class 4 separated bikeways. So these can be implemented with some trade-offs. They can be added to an existing bicycle lane. If you were to add a buffer zone, so that area to the left of the bicycle lane with the hatched markings on the pavement. And then it would also involve some sort of vertical element. Typically, what you'll see with this type of facility is a delineator to start off, at least. Um, so those sort of white poles that stick up from the asphalt. And then spot treatment enhancements, which would essentially be upgrades, would be landscaped medians or planters. Um, let's see, had some additional notes on this. A benefit of that buffer, that is the hatched area on the pavement, also protects bicyclists from what we refer to as the door zone. So as you can see, that parked vehicle on the outside of the bicycle facility, if a passenger were to exit that vehicle and open their door into the um, and open their door. Without that buffer zone, that door could bleed into the bicyclist path of travel, which could create a collision. So class 4 separated bikeways with that buffer area help to increase the distance between a bicyclist and a potential door opening of a vehicle. And then the next slide, please. And then we have the class 1 off-street trails. So these are most popular among the community, as we heard in the public engagement survey number 1. These typically are a longer term implementation, just because of the right-of-way that's needed and the planning and design involved. But spot treatment enhancement for these facilities could include formalizing existing pathways or constructing bridges over challenging terrain, which we'll get into later in the presentation. So those are the 4 primary types of bikeway facilities that we'll be presenting in this plan. In the next series of slides, we'll be getting into the different corridors that are proposed, and then the public survey that we have open for this phase of the project. And actually, we do have on the next slide some additional spot treatment enhancements. So as we further the Eureka bike plan and start identifying which corridors are most prioritized by the community and by different metrics that illustrate that the corridor itself will be successful in implementation or qualifying for grant funding, that's when the design of spot treatments on the corridor itself will start to be developed. So for signalized intersections, bicycle signal heads could be a spot treatment enhancement. These are beneficial where you essentially have red, green, and yellow lights for the bicyclist and a separate phasing for the vehicle traffic so that you can separate out the movements. That way you don't have, say, a vehicle making a right-hand turn with a bicyclist proceeding straight when they both have a green light, because that would create a conflict and potential for collision. And then bicycle detection and actuation is essentially the signal will recognize when there's a bicyclist queuing at the intersection in order to provide them with the green light. And then on the next slide, we have an example of bicycle treatments at unsignalized intersections. So in this image, there is a hybrid beacon. So it has the mast and the mast arm like a signal, and this would be actuated or activated by a bicyclist who approaches it. And then active warning beacons are those diamond-shaped posts on the side in which when you press a button, they light up with the flashing lights to indicate to vehicles that they are to yield to a pedestrian or a bicyclist. And there's a couple locations where these are implemented within the city already, such as at the intersection of Spring Street and Henderson Street. And then the next image includes wayfinding. So wayfinding is a beneficial way to help guide bicyclists through the network and make decisions based on where they're trying to go. So we all use some form of Apple Maps or Google Maps on our phones, and this is essentially just a physical mapping device for the bicyclist so that it lowers the stress on them as they're trying to navigate to where their destination is. And then last, we do have, or second to last, we have protected intersections again. So this is just another example from a different perspective. So you have some cross bikes through the intersection, which are those green dashed lines. Cross bikes, you can think of them like crosswalks. It's essentially delineates the bicyclist path of travel through the intersection. And then you can see on the left in the image the corner island of concrete so that the vehicle would essentially make its turn around that. Um, and then in the last image, we have bicycle parking. So depending on where the top corridors are and where the most activity occurs, bicycle parking could be an improvement near key destinations. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and jump into the overall map. So what we have here is the city of Eureka, and in the 4 color codes, we have the different classes of bikeways that were just discussed. What you see in solid lines are bikeways that are currently existing or programmed. So when we say programmed, we mean that it has been funded through construction and it is going to be part of the network in the next couple years. So we've shown these programmed improvements as existing so that we can better understand where to propose corridors in order to create a full network. In where you see the double dashed lines, so they look like little equal signs in a row. These are the corridors that the Eureka Bike Plan is proposing. And then the planned bikeways are shown in the single dashed lines. And so these are bikeways that are already part of planned documents by, say, the county of Humboldt. And then we'll go on to the next slide. And so here we have access to public survey engagement number 2. This survey is being presented through Mentimeter and it is now open. So if you want to go ahead and utilize your cell phone or a separate web browser to type in the URL and code, or you can scan the QR code using your phone. And you can go ahead and take this survey as we're walking through the presentation. The link to the survey will also be posted on the city's project website after this meeting. The link will be active for 2 weeks. That's all that Mentimeter will provide. At that point, we'll go ahead and refresh the link and provide an updated one. So the survey will be open for a total of 1 month. So you can complete the survey now, or you can complete it at a later date if you want to have more time to review the proposed corridors. But all participants are limited to 1 response. So the first question that will be presented to you when you open the survey is one in which you're assigned 100 points. And then the task for that first question is essentially assign the 100 points to the corridors that you would prioritize the most. So you could essentially choose 10 different corridors which you prioritize equally, or you could choose one corridor that you prioritize the most and assign all 100 points to that corridor. It's up to you. You can do any split of that 100 points in groupings of 10. And this essentially will indicate to us which corridors are top of the list in terms of the community's preference. And then in the second question, you'll be asked within the same list of the 17 corridors, which facility you would want to upgrade. So if you notice from this map, there is a high density of Class 3 bicycle boulevards that are proposed in this plan. All of the proposed corridors we have developed in order to make the least impact on the existing conditions. So for majority of these roadways, there's 2 vehicle travel lanes, there's parking on both sides. And in order to provide a bicycle facility without taking anything away from what's existing, a bicycle boulevard or a shared lane is essentially what will fit within that corridor. So question number 2 is essentially asking you, of all the 17 proposed corridors, which one of these would you support if, say, the city were to propose removing parking in order to provide a bikeway that has enhanced separation? from vehicle traffic. So let's say if it's a class 3, you would upgrade it to a class 2, a bicycle lane. Or if it's a class 2 bicycle lane, you would upgrade it to a uh, protected bicycle lane with that vertical element in between the motor vehicle traffic and the bicycle lane. And then there are two open-ended questions, which we can get into later on, but from within Menti, they have an explanation there, so you don't necessarily need us to walk you through that one. And then at the end slide, you'll be presented with a link to complete a series of demographic questions. This section is completely optional, but it helps us understand who is participating in the survey. And then we can go ahead and jump into the next slide. Okay, so this is the first of our 17 proposed corridors, and this one runs east-west with a small connector north-south on Washington 8th, Washington Street, 8th Street, M Street, and L Street. So this one takes advantage of existing traffic signals that help the bicyclist cross Broadway on Washington and at L Street. Washington where it meets with Broadway, and then L Street where it crosses 4th Street and 5th Street. This one is just one block south of the existing bike lanes on 7th Street, but 7th Street tends to be more popular among motor vehicles. It's a little bit of a busier roadway. So this proposed corridor is essentially a lower stress facility where a bicyclist can travel east-west and to downtown without having to travel on 6th Street or 7th Street if they're going either east or west. As we go through these slides, they're all formatted in essentially the same way. We will list out the benefits, such as access to different destinations, anywhere where there's signalized intersections that helps the bicyclist cross challenging, what might be challenging roadways due to higher traffic volumes. And then for bikeway connections, we list out the quantity of connections that the bicyclist could make to different facilities using the proposed corridor. And then we also include the existing conditions. So currently there are no existing bikeway facilities on 8th Street in Washington. There is some brief traffic calming improvements on M Street. And then this proposed corridor essentially accentuates those improvements through formalizing this route as a bicycle boulevard. And then we can move on to the next slide.
Hi there. I'm going to give Jay a little break. Thank you, Jay, for all that. And as a reminder, we'll walk through each of these corridors. And then the idea is that everyone has an opportunity to use the Menti survey tool to weigh in and help provide your input. So whether you're participating tonight in real time in the workshop or after the fact and just watching the video. So I wanted to take a couple slides and talk about two corridors in particular. The next one that we wanted to highlight is McFarland Street, which is just to the east of the future Beta Zoo Trail. On the map on the right, you could see the green line for the planned and programmed Beta Zoo Trail. The city has the funding to go ahead and implement that. And then another option essentially is to go ahead and explore bicycle boulevard improvements along McFarland, the roadway. It's a residential street that goes north-south from Myrtle down to the south towards the dog park and the grassy area behind Zane School. So in that area, the idea is to go ahead and have that north-south connectivity. As it goes past the dog park, it would connect over to 23rd Street and then over to Harrison as well. So it's a mix of, in that case, of bicycle boulevard class 3 and maybe bike lanes, and try and provide some sort of improvement along Harrison that could provide some access to the medical in that area. Okay, next slide. We also wanted to highlight a similar idea of a bicycle boulevard on 3rd Street going more east-west in the downtown area. We saw when we were looking at the site and interacting with the community that this east-west connectivity would be nice to have something that's in between 4th and Waterfront or 1st. And 3rd Street seems to line up really well, especially with where it crosses the Caltrans roadway, that Samoa, that Myrtle, and the 255. Today, there's a pedestrian crossing at that location, and then highlighted in the map here in orange is a call out that says bicycle enhancements to the existing pedestrian crosswalk. So we've seen other locations in other jurisdictions throughout the state where that pedestrian crosswalk could be improved to go ahead and serve both bicycle and pedestrian space, maybe by widening the gap in the median in the roadway, and then potential other improvements there to provide a comfortable and safe crossing. And then with each of these, as Jay has mentioned too, we've identified some of the benefits. So we talk about access in the downtown, connection with the transit authority, other important facilities like the waterfront trail or the library in the downtown area here. Today, there's no designated bikeway here, and the bicycle boulevard would provide that opportunity to really encourage and enhance bicycle travel in the east-west direction there. All right, I'll hand it back off to Jay for a few more.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So here we have presented Hawthorne and Humboldt Street between the Waterfront Trail and J Street. So this one was identified to take advantage of the newly implemented traffic signal at the intersection of Hawthorne and Highway 101 or Broadway. So this Broadway can be a challenging corridor to cross for bicyclists without the traffic signal, just due to the traffic volumes, so the amount of vehicles that are traveling through. So by providing a Class 3 bicycle boulevard through this corridor, it essentially supports the bicyclist getting across over to the Waterfront Trail if they're headed west. And then if they're headed east, it leads directly to Eureka High School. So this could be a beneficial bicycle corridor for students to travel to their high school from different locations throughout the city. So they would be able to travel from either further north or further south using the Waterfront Trail, and then bicycle to school on this lower stress facility. And then we can advance to the next slide. Okay, so this Class 3 bikeway essentially kind of wraps around Eureka High School on the northern edge. So where you see that parcel that is almost like on the inside of what looks like an upside down letter L, that's the high school's field. And it would connect on the western edge over to the existing bike lanes on J Street. And then traveling south on N Street, there is an existing how would we say it? We're calling it a bicycle and pedestrian link. It's essentially a section of the roadway that is foliaged. So it's between a couple trees, and it's currently used by bicyclists and pedestrians. So vehicles cannot travel through it, which creates what is like a natural traffic diverter. So therefore you already have lower traffic volumes on N Street. So this corridor would look into providing some improvements at those locations with the foliage. So this would benefit high school students who could then use the corridor to travel to the existing bike lanes on J Street, and potentially some of the other proposed corridors that are included in this list of 17. And then we can go on to the next quarter.
All right, and then wanted to highlight this idea of nice east-west connectivity between Henderson Center area on the west, using Rush Street, and then zigzagging down a little towards Hodgson, and then over to the zoo, the northern edge of the zoo. So we've identified a couple of different roadways that provide this kind of wiggle opportunity. We've got another location after this as well, where it's a similar idea of trying to have some connectivity and a nice location to be able to cross Harris Street to go in this general east-west direction and access the zoo. You can see also, again, as a reminder, what we've highlighted is the proposed bicycle boulevard along Russ and those other roadways, and where they cross those solid lines for the existing bikeways or the ones that are being constructed right now with H&I, for example. So you get a lot of opportunity to be able to cross and provide access with other bikeways, creating a greater network throughout the city. Okay. And then the next one is a little more to the southwest, again, from Harris, in this case, near the Winco Foods, providing a north-south from Harris down Elizabeth and over along South and making its way over to Highland Avenue. In this location in particular, you get access with the Winco Foods, the shopping center in that area that has a couple different businesses, goes right by Alice Burney Elementary School and then Highland Park. And then the southern edge, it's not shown in green here, but the southern edge of the state fort in that area, the park where the fort is, and then providing that access to Broadway and getting close to in the area to the Bayshore Mall. And then that lines up with some of the improvements that Caltrans has about the north-south improvements along Broadway, the 101. So generally what's highlighted here and outlined is, again, a bicycle boulevard. These are mostly residential streets with homes fronting, but you do get that good access in that area, and not everyone would have to travel along Harris or Broadway for all of that, but be able to ride a more comfortable and slower pace roadway with slower volume or slower traveling cars. Okay, back to you, Jay.
Okay, thanks. So here we have 15th Street between Summer Street and M Street. So this corridor would provide access to Eureka High School and St. Bernard's Academy. It's a lower volume east-west alternative to 14th Street. And one of the key benefits of this is actually that it is sort of existing in two segments. So west of C Street, there is a wider right-of-way. When we say right-of-way, we mean the width of the roadway between the two curbs. So east of C Street would be a Class 3 bicycle boulevard, and west of C Street, what we're proposing is a Class 4 facility. So a bicycle lane that has a buffer and a vertical element between the bicycle lane and the lane of moving motor vehicle traffic. So that enhanced separation. And it's because the roadway already is much wider than other roadways within the city. So there's flexibility to go ahead and add additional enhancements without having to take anything away, such as parking or one vehicle travel lane. And then we can go ahead and advance to the next slide. And then here we have Spring Street, and this is similar to the last one in that it consists of two types of facilities. So this one is between Wabash and Harris Street. So it is a bicycle boulevard on the northern end, and it accesses local transit stops, the Winco supermarket, and this one we had actually originally identified after looking at Fairfield Street for a north-south connector, and found that the vehicle volumes and speeds on Fairfield might be a little bit too high for a low-stress, comfortable bicycling route. So we looked at adjacent corridors, and Spring Street really stuck out to us as one that could be high comfort. It has the existing rapid rectangular flashing beacons at the intersections with Henderson and Harris. So there's already curb extensions and enhanced crossing facilities for pedestrians that a bicyclist could also benefit from. And then the Class 4 that we're looking at, or that we're proposing between Henderson Street and Harris Street, would essentially be on the westerly side of the roadway, and you would have the two lanes of bicycle travel condensed into one side. And the reason for this is that the westerly side of Spring Street in that block is adjacent to the shopping center, and it already has some limitations on parking. It's currently commercial parking, so you would not be taking away any residents parking who live nearby. And then there's only the two driveways that enter and exit the shopping center. So with less driveways, you have less movements where a motor vehicle would cross over the bikeway, and less movements like that result in less potential conflict. So we were looking at this roadway and thought that it would be a great opportunity to provide that higher comfort level bikeway facility, such as a class 4. And then we can go ahead and advance to the next slide. A few blocks further to the east, we also have Summer Street. So this also provides that good north-south connectivity, and this would be between 15th Street and Harris Street. So it provides access to downtown through navigating to connecting bikeways, Zoe Barnum High School, and the Food for People food bank. Right now, there is Dias Park in the middle of it, and there is an existing pedestrian walkway that a bicyclist can use to cross through the park. This park is actually planned for some upgrades as part of the park master plan, but this Eureka bike plan would propose providing upgrades to a trail through the park so that bicyclists can more comfortably use it with less with more separation from any pedestrians that are currently on that trail, so that everybody can use the facilities through the park happily. So when you have a facility such as that, an off-street trail through a corridor, you essentially have one of those natural traffic diverters. So the result would be less vehicle traffic on the same corridor, resulting in a lower stress facility. It would jog to, I think that's Pine Street briefly, just because of the existing roadway network. It doesn't have a straight cut through right there, but you would navigate back to Summer Street as you're continuing north. And then we can go ahead and advance to the next slide.
All right, and I wanted to talk about First Street. So now we're in the area in the downtown again. So in between C Street and over towards H and I in that direction. So currently today we identify this is where the trail, the actual off-street trail terminates as you come up from the southwest. The trail serves both bicyclists and pedestrians and is separated from car traffic. Right at C Street it ends. So then as a cyclist, you would be directed into the roadway to continue riding along First or Waterfront in that area. So we have a two-phased approach recommendation of, in the near term, make some bicycle boulevard treatments and identifying the wayfinding and the route through the area. With also the benefit of a master plan, you can always throw out some ideas of some long-term concepts for improvements. So in this case, we still would like to explore this idea of the continuity of that separated space for people to bicycle and walk. Maybe it's a cycle track or some sort of off-street multi-purpose trail for both bicyclists and pedestrians in the area that's dashed, going east in the easterly direction, essentially. But serving both directions. I really just mean going east. There's a second thing also. While this identifies First, there's also the trail directly adjacent to water's edge. Today, there's the boardwalk that terminates at a certain point. We are showing the dash lines to try and get that continued over towards the community, the civic center, where the aquatic center is, and the Adorni Center. So again, some of that is more complicated because maybe there's existing businesses that really have access to the water's edge, but it's nice in a master plan document to have some line on the map. So if in the future there's some opportunity that the city has a good mechanism to try and help with some implementation. Okay, so then continuing in that area, as you continue east, the railroad tracks that are in the roadway around H Street, they transition to a separated space going east. So we have both the roadway waterfront drive and the trail or the railroad corridor. And at that point, as you go east of H Street, they separate. So today, along the roadway waterfront drive, the city does have striped bike lanes. And there's been interest in the community and as well from the Great Redwood Trail Agency to go ahead and look at the opportunities for adding a bikeway or a multi-use trail that's separated from the roadway within that rail corridor. So we had the lines on the map to go ahead and continue coordinating with the Great Redwood Trail Agency to look at how to make that happen, recognizing that in this area, the railroad tracks are currently in the ground and still some issues to work out. I do want to highlight also what we've got outlined shows Waterfront Drive and then the railroad corridor. And then as a reminder, there is that solid green line for the bikeway that goes east of the Adorney Center and under the 255. It loops around and is along the water's edge. And the city does have some plans for making some improvements along there to straighten out some of the turns and the jogs, and then also providing fresh pavement and so on. So there's a lot of opportunities in this area to travel east-west and some long-term ideas for additional improvements as well. All right, back to you, Jay.
Okay, thanks, Paul. And then on the next slide, we have Wabash Avenue between Spring Street and H Street. So this corridor actually already has existing bike lanes, so we didn't want to overlook those just because there's already a bicycle facility there. We would propose, this bike plan would propose enhancements to those existing bike lanes, such as what were described at the top of this presentation. This corridor provides access to Costco, Humboldt Senior Resource Center, and commercial storefronts on Broadway. And our proposal is essentially to go ahead and provide bikeway enhancements just up until Spring Street on the westerly end, and then provide through the proposed corridors access to other routes to cross east-west or travel north-south. The reason for this is, as you can see in that turquoise single dashed line work that travels along Broadway, this Caltrans Coster couplet concept is planned for this area. And the intersection of Highway 101 and Wabash is planned for where the two directions of vehicle travel will reconverge. So we're generally looking years in advance and looking to provide a bicyclist network that would maybe go around that intersection just for a higher comfort level of navigation for the bicyclist. And then on the east side, it would extend it up to H Street, which is where the city currently has programmed bicycle lanes incoming. And then we can go ahead to the next slide. So here we have Henderson Street and Harris Street. So these two already have class 2 existing bike lanes. On Henderson, that's between Fairfield Street and I Street, and on Harris Street, that would be between Fairfield and Harrison. So the proposal would actually be two aspects. One would be providing bicycle lane enhancements where there are currently bicycle lanes existing. And then we would propose closing the bike lane gaps. So over on the westerly end, going ahead and extending those bike lanes down to Broadway, since there is just about a block or a block and a half where the bike lane does not exist. And then that would work well with connecting to the planned improvements on Broadway by Caltrans, which is planned for a Class 4 cycle track. And then let's see. Yeah, so these two couplet roadways, which are one direction each, they provide access to the schools, commercial retail, Sequoia Park, and then we would also look into spot treatment enhancements, particularly along Harris Street. We have heard some very beneficial feedback from the student at St. Bernard's. Specifically, youth don't always have their licenses, so they're often walking or bicycling throughout the city. So we heard some great feedback from them as to where it's challenging to cross these roadways, these two primary roadways that surround the school. So we would look into providing some spot treatment enhancements based on their feedback, as well as the feedback from the general community in public engagement survey number 1. And then we can go ahead and advance to the next slide, and I'll hand it back to Paul.
All right. So then Jay just talked about a pairing of one-way streets. We have another one here with 6th and 7th. So in the downtown area, 4th and 5th is Highway 101. Just south of there, you've got 6th and 7th. We know the community travels along those corridors. Today, there is 2 travel lanes along each of those roadways. There's on-street parking on both sides, and there's an on-street bike lane for each of those one-way roadways, going westbound on 6th and eastbound on 7th. So our recommendation is to continue with the on-street bike lane and provide enhancements. So maybe there's some opportunities to provide a buffered bike lane by narrowing up those travel lanes. And then we'll work with the city and see if there's some other opportunities going forward as well. But generally, it's from Myrtle Avenue on the east all the way west to Century Commercial or Broadway in that area. So looking at that whole corridor as a good bypass to be able to avoid using 4th or 5th. Okay. Thanks, Jerry. And then, oh yes, so Myrtle. So then also I wanted to highlight Myrtle has been talked about in the community recently. We do have this nice connectivity north-south to be able to get from downtown to Myrtletown along the roadway, Myrtle Avenue. Provides those good options for connectivity for that east-west bike boulevard on 3rd, as well as the 6th and 7th connections that I just talked about, all the way down to the Beta Zoo Trail in McFarland. So this concept is really how we can enhance the on-street bike lanes that exist there today. The city does have some programmed money to be able to make some improvements along Myrtle west of the roadway called West Avenue. So some of that's coming soon. And then we've spoken a lot with them about exploring what the additional improvements could occur. So this is another scenario with some short-term improvements of looking at some of the bike lane enhancements that Jay brought up earlier at the beginning of this presentation, and then explore if there's opportunities for a long-term or medium-term scenario of a 2-way cycle track. So a bicyclist traveling on the northerly side of Myrtle throughout this corridor is shown, and recognizing that some sort of implementation like that might come with some trade-offs. So how does it navigate that West and Myrtle intersection, which is busy, and how do you still provide the travel lanes and parking that is desired by the community in this area? So again, this falls into one of those categories of providing an opportunity with a line on the map and identify and explore what those trade-offs are, those concerns, and keep looking at how that can evolve over time. Okay. All right, thanks. Is Jay there? Jay, are you there?
Yeah, you
Oh,
froze on my end. Are we all synced up again? Can you
You're
hear me?
good. Go ahead, Jay.
Okay, great. Okay, so we have our 17th and last corridor that we're presenting as part of this proposed list of corridors. And this is California Street. So this is the one slide where the north is oriented to the left rather than up on the map. So we're going to have to kind of shift our perspective a little to understand where this is at. This is in the southern edge of the city. And it actually, if you look at the map, where you see that dashed black line in the map, it travels up and down on the page. That is the city boundary. So north of that line is within the city of Eureka, and on California Street, the existing California Street, we're essentially proposing a Class 3 bicycle boulevard. Further south of where California Street currently exists, there is a set aside for a roadway. It's a sort of like an easement or a right-of-way set aside within the county in case a roadway is needed within the future. This set aside then continues further south and re-enters the city of Eureka within the municipal golf course. So what we're proposing is just to go ahead and plan that in the long term, the city and the county will coordinate and implement an off-street trail throughout that roadway set aside. There's no roadway that exists here today, but there could be one in the future. So we're including this as in the proposed bicycle routes. So that the city can go ahead and leverage that set aside for constructing a separated bikeway at some point in the future. And then, of course, on the southern end, it would connect to the existing.
It looks like we
It's
just
like we lost Jay.
Yeah. So then I think she was just going to say how it provides that connectivity from the north down to Fairway. So, and then also to the west where Fairway turns into Herrick, and then the access towards all the way the west to the Bay Trail. Okay. So then we'll keep going. I think Jay's coming back, but we'll give you a minute. Also, something that Jay mentioned earlier was we wanted to explore with the community this idea of some sort of bicycle pedestrian connection, active transportation bridge, to really address some of the topography in the city. So there's some locations in the city that have some pretty notable canyons or valleys or the sloughs, in the places where you might really look at some sort of bridge structure, whether it's elevated or suspended or something a lot like the images shown there. Jay, it looks like you're back. Do you want to do this or shall I? You're on mute.
Last I saw, I was speaking during the California street slide. I'm not sure what you guys heard or not.
Yeah, you were almost there. I finished up California and then I just started on this one, but I'll keep going, and then Jay, you let me know if I'm missing anything. So on this one with these bridge structures, we are really looking at it and exploring similar precedents from throughout the state. Some of the images, the image on the right, the bottom one, it looks a little more rustic, but the image on the upper right is from Santa Cruz, where there's a similar condition with the slough or some topography where the community has a bridge structure over a gulch to really close the gap on that desire line of being able to cross through that area with a gulch or a slough. So again, I've talked about the benefits. Some of the challenges is really if you were to just have some sort of paved trail that went up and down that topography, you've got to deal with the erosion and the costs associated with that. And maybe there's some opportunities to have some sort of gap that is at an elevated structure and just bridges over whatever that gulch is or the slough. So we have some ideas on our end and some locations that we think seem good for something like this, but through the survey, we ask everyone to go ahead and weigh in on which locations you think this would be good. And because it's an open-ended question, we'd ask you to try and be as precise as you can. I think it'd be good to go east-west between L Street and M Street or whatever the specific roadways are, for us to really envision that and draw those lines on the map. Jay, did I miss anything on that?
You captured all of it, yeah. So that's question number 3 in the Mentimeter survey that we have.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Go
and
ahead
then we can go
going.
ahead and then within the Mentimeter survey, so we can go ahead and advance to the next slide. There are the total of 4 questions. So the one inquiring where you would be interested in seeing that sort of bridge structure, that's the 3rd question. And then the 4th question is an open-ended response form. So you can submit as many times. So if you have any specific comments on any corridors, then you can go ahead and provide those in question number 4 on the Mentimeter. We ask that because we hope to receive a lot of responses. We ask that if you have comments on different corridors, that you submit the different comments in different submissions. So you can enter a comment and then it will ask if you want to enter another comment. So if you separate your comments out by corridor, that helps us review and analyze all the answers efficiently. I'm going to go ahead and present what we have collected so far in terms of the prioritization. So the assignment of 100 points. And I just want to reiterate that what I will show you today is a reflection of the responses that have been collected to date. So this survey will be open for 1 more month. And so these results will change and vary as we collect more input from additional members of the community. So we can just keep it on this slide for a minute and I will load the results.
So Jay, just to be clear, these are the results that that are just anybody on the meeting tonight have put into the Mentimeter, or since it's been open when at the start of this presentation have added in there. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Exactly.
Just if anyone went ahead in the last hour, essentially, but just because the survey only went live essentially today, but we thought it'd be handy for everyone to get a little sense of what it looks like if anyone has completed it already. And then, as Jay noted, it might just be 1 or 2 people, but then you get a little sense of what it looks like and how we'll use the information. Okay, go ahead, Jay.
Yep. Thanks. So Mentimeter has gone ahead and already organized the corridors in terms of in order of how many points that they have received. So on the top of the list, we have Myrtle Avenue, 3rd Street to Harrison Avenue. So what that's telling us is so far from everybody who has participated in this public engagement survey question, Myrtle has received the most points out of all that have been assigned. And then this is followed by 3rd Street between Broadway and Y Street. And then 3rd and tied would be 6th Street and 7th Street bikeway enhancements to existing bike lanes. So we just wanted to go ahead and provide a brief preview of this so that you can get a visual of how your results are being combined with everyone's who's participating in this public engagement survey. And we'll continue to work to be transparent in the results that come in. Let's see, we will also have a similar voting exercise at the in-person March 7th community meeting.
Jay, I want to jump into part of the point also for us to see and have the public weigh in on this is when we go after grants with the state or the federal government, a lot of times it's really helpful for us to show, of course, that a project is a priority. So one of the ways to identify what the prioritized projects are is to illustrate that the community asked for this thing in particular. So if we were to take a snapshot of this, if it was to stay static of what the scoring is today, then it would help us really say, let's look at the top couple projects and maybe pursue grant funding to implement those. So we wanted to be able to go through all the projects in detail, but then let everyone weigh in on those. So then we can throw that into the hopper for the prioritization. And then in the report, it'll be documented which ones score the best for their benefit for safety or the access to certain parts of the community and destinations, connections to other bikeways, and then, of course, the public input side of it.
Thanks, Paul.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and then Veronica, if you can take us back to screen share for perfect. Yeah. Oh, we just saw it.
I see it. Okay. It says community meeting number 2.
Is it flashing on? Okay, it's flashing on my end. Okay, so as a reminder, we have this public survey number 2 through Mentimeter available online. The last slide of the Mentimeter will provide a link to go ahead and complete those demographic questions, and that will be through Microsoft Forms. And And as Paul had mentioned about submitting grant applications to state and federal programs, what the demographics questions does for the project team is allows us to complete information in those grant applications, demonstrating that we reached members of the community who represent the actual demographic makeup of the city of Eureka. The community workshop will be in person on Thursday, March 7th at 5:30 p.m. It will go until 8 o'clock p.m. This will be at the Jefferson Community Center. We'll be presenting the same information that we presented tonight, and we will be conducting a similar voting exercise in which participants can utilize like a 100-point system to assign to different corridors, and then separately vote on a corridor that they would prioritize for an increased degree of separation from motor vehicle traffic through a sort of trade-off. Let's see, we'll also be collecting public comments at the in-person community workshop. It's a great opportunity to attend if you would like to have a more nuanced discussion on any one of the specific corridors. We can really dive into the details and discuss specific locations within those, within the proposed corridors. You, of course, are also welcome to submit any specific comments through public engagement survey number 2 in the open-ended response question. And then I wanted to close this slide with mentioning the corridor prioritization process that Paul mentioned in the last slide. So this bike plan will continue to investigate the 17 proposed corridors, and the prioritization process essentially evaluates how effective each corridor will be at meeting local, regional, state, and federally adopted transportation goals. So public feedback is one of the metrics involved. There's a variety of other metrics. We are still working through exactly what those look like, and our project task force members in the city will be workshopping those before they go public. But the prioritization process will essentially identify, as part of this plan, the 5 corridors with the best performance overall to move forward to the next phase of development. And that next phase of development will be where very specific spot treatments and 30% design concepts will be developed. So at the end of this overall Eureka Bike Plan project development, there will be 5 corridors that are very close to being ready or at the starting line to be submitted to various grant applications so that the city can go ahead and kickstart pursuit of funding to go ahead and construct enhanced, high comfort, low stress bikeways within the city of Eureka. And then the next slide, please. Okay, so this is the end of our presentation. Right underneath the project logo is the link to the project website, so you can visit that. We'll be posting the resources that were shown in this meeting. My email is on the screen. That's jriddle, JRIDDLE @markthomas.com. So you can submit any questions you might have. You can send them my way, or you can send them to the bikePlan@eurekaca.gov email address. They'll be forwarded to me. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. And then we have the city project manager, Jesse Willer, with us today. Yeah, thank you, Jesse. And that essentially concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for participating in this community meeting tonight. We look forward to looking through your feedback through public engagement survey number 2, and we hope to see you for the in-person community meeting on March 7th.